Unwelcome, The Muslims Next Door. CNN Sunday night, 8 Eastern.
Watch Dr. Drew's new show at 9 on HLN. Premieres April 4th.
Some people just laid there. They were with a very shallow breathing. They look like, you know, an animal that you see on the side of the road that's been hit by a car that's just barely hanging in there.
Graphic, damning testimony about the terror and chaos inside and outside a deadly sweat lodge. Tonight, we psychoanalyze this guy, James Ray, the so-called enlightened guru who is on trial for manslaughter. Is he responsible for the deaths of 3 followers who each paid nearly 10 grand to take part in his strange rituals? The first Ray employee to testify says that well before anybody died at the lodge, people all around her showed clear signs of heat stroke. One participant expressed his terror of dying.
He was very loud, saying he doesn't want to die, screaming and just being crazy. And I was very concerned, and I had a really, like, a stern look on my face. I was just looking around like, oh my gosh, what's going on? And I was told, just get that look off of your face because people are going to think something's wrong and you need to be calm and you can't have that look of alarm on your face. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I mean, there is something wrong. This is not seeming right. And they said, no, it is fine. This is normal. It's normal for people to be this way.
But it wasn't normal. People died. Linda Martin says she was told not to intervene, to let the participants, quote, have their own experience. These innocent people put their trust in self-help guru James Ray, a man who starred in the hit movie The Secret. Remember this?
Every tradition has told us there's something bigger than us. And the genie always says one thing.
Your wish is my command.
Was a so-called spiritual leader who said he had all the answers on the edge of his own breakdown. Some of the testimony paints him as a callous, ego-driven, temperamental bully. What will the jury believe? Straight out to Michael Christian, senior field producer for In Session on True TV. Michael, you've been inside court listening to this astounding testimony. What were the biggest bombshells today?
Well, you know, the bulk of the testimony on Thursday, Jane, was a woman named Melinda Martin. Now, she was an events coordinator for James Ray International, which was the defendant's company. She was present outside the sweat lodge as the ceremony was going on, and she said it was pandemonium from the beginning. This thing consisted of 8 rounds. 8 rounds where hot stones were brought in. She said as early as the end of the first round, there were people coming out. She recalled one woman who came out at the end of the first round and said, oh, this is bad, this is bad. I don't like the way this is making me feel. I want to be the way I was before. Pandemonium as that sweat lodge went on, as those rounds continued, more and more people coming out, more and more bad things that Melinda Martin saw.
Well, here's my big issue. Guru, heal thyself. Is James Ray psychologically disturbed? We heard testimony about his temper today. Another witness revealed something even more troubling. She says she was instructed by James Ray to focus on sex. Check this out.
Talk about your sexual experiences, how you learned about sex, who all your sexual partners were, every sexual experience you've ever had, and keep journaling and journaling and journaling until you run out. He said that sex was one of the most stimulating ideas or stimulating things to the body that you should be able to express yourself, and you would be able to get to the core of things that are bothering you through that.
Connie Joy, you wrote Tragedy In Sedona, My Life in James Arthur Ray's Inner Circle. You're a former member of that inner circle. Okay, this guy played God. He encouraged people to shave their heads. He made people lie motionless for hours. He told them to go without food and water for 36 hours. Is he some kind of bully or sadist?
Well, he's definitely a bully, Jane. What you saw and what they talked about and testified to, that some of the Dream Team people encountered some rage fits from him about the fact that they just had a couple bottles of wine and were sitting back and relaxing one night. That was just 2 months earlier. We had encountered a similar fit from him while we were with him in Peru, which he just lashed into us, and we stood up to him, and it turns into one of his personal bullying attacks. This had been going on and getting worse and worse all through 2009, and I believe the only thing that stopped him was what happened at the Spiritual Warrior event. Otherwise, he would just keep going.
All right, Stacey Onowitz, Florida prosecutor. One witness said that he passed out, woke up, and James Ray was smiling at him and said, go get a shower and get ready for dinner. This while people are passing out and ultimately dying around him. How does the defense counteract that? I mean, to me, that's damning.
Well, it is very damning, Jane, and the bottom line is we know that the defense in this case is that it was poisons or toxins in the air that caused the death. The prosecution's theory of the case is this man was reckless and he endangered the lives of these people by using mind control and by doing all the things that he did that led up to the sweat lodge. So the defense has a huge hurdle in this case, and I think the prosecution is going to say, how can you think it's toxins or poison because not that many people or so many more people would have ended up in the hospital. So the defense really doesn't have much to go on when they're hearing the testimony of this witness who really was trying to get out of the sweat lodge.
But as we've been saying from the start, there was no lock on the door. People could leave if they were determined to do so. We're going to have more on this also later. Chris Brown firing back. You won't believe. Quite an experience, one to remember. I will remember this definitely for the rest of my life. And it's really beautiful. Look at that. Look how hot it is in there. It's very intense time inside a sweat lodge a few weeks ago. I'll never forget it. And of course, my experience didn't compare to what James Ray's followers went through at his sweat lodge. Nobody died at the sweat lodge I attended. His was reportedly much hotter than the usual sweat lodge. Jackie, South Carolina, your question or thought, ma'am?
Yeah, I find it really curious that James Ray's belief system, which seems to cobble together a lot of different old belief systems into one, is really strong about blaming people for any illness or anything bad in their life, that they've drawn that to themselves. So I'd be really curious to see what he says the reason that all of this is happening to him.
Oh, that's a good one. Connie Joy, take it.
Well, we've always said if you get a chance to ask him a question on the stand, the question you should ask him is, what did he do to draw this into his life? Because that's what he would always say to us in events. If something was wrong in our lives, he'd say, what did you do to attract this into your life? I think what he did to attract this into his life is not taking responsibility for his own actions and ignoring things that happened, such as just a few months before, a woman committed suicide at one of his events right here in San Diego. That was completely swept under the table. The money wasn't refunded to her family, and the participants weren't even told about it or with the volunteers.
Oh my gosh, I've never heard about that. Can I interrupt you for a second? Michael Christian, have you heard about that at all?
It hasn't come up in the trial. I've heard things about it, but it hasn't come up in the trial.
Wow. Okay. Check out the defense grilling this particular witness. This is fascinating.
And when you use terms such as a MASH unit, mass suicide.
It was like a MASH unit.
MASH unit? Military Army Surgical Hospital, MASH unit, mass suicide. Would you agree with me that that sensationalizes?
I didn't say it was I didn't say that. I didn't say that it was that was my opinion about it being a mass suicide. One of the EMT asked me that.
And these are quotes attributed to you by ABC News and CNN.
Okay.
Stacey Onowitz, could that backfire, accusing a witness of overstating something where 3 people died?
No, of course not. I mean, listen, we discussed it before. The defense has to try to really do anything to make their point, but they're really not making a point in this case. She took the stand. She's testifying as to what she saw. If she made a statement other than that maybe was a little bit out of character, she characterized it as being somewhat like a MASH unit. The idea that it's a matter of semantics, a play on words, isn't really going to help the defense in this type of case.
Michael Christian, briefly, I've heard that James Ray has cried.
He did. He heard some testimony from a man named Stephen Ray, who had actually been a friend of his to some extent. He was someone who was at the sweat lodge, and he heard him. I'm sorry, it was Lou Catchy who was a friend of his. And at one point during Lou Catchy's testimony, talking about his experiences, he's the guy who burned his arm. James Ray did start crying and left the courtroom. They called a break. He left the courtroom. When he came back, he was composed. They went on. At one point in Lou Catchy's testimony, subsequent to that, Lou Catchy